Years later sees not 15 founders arriving at Kedworth, but 250 owners who've come from all over the country to attend this 40th birthday party. To accommodate all these cars, Donmog Centre talked the local school into allowing them the use of their playing field as a car park. A further problem to be overcome was the fact that the pub isn't physically big enough to accommodate 250 Morgan owners, plus all its regular customers. Again, Donmog resolved the problem, this time with sponsorship from the local tyre manufacturer Pirelli. A marquee was hired and erected on the car park behind the pub. Photographs are part of the club's record of that first meeting. The pub, the size of the club and the style of the car have changed a little over the last 40 years, but today is a time for reminiscing about the early days, as Bill Parks explains to Malcolm Lamb.
Here we are, 30th of June 1991. You were here some 40 years ago today, yes?
Right, yeah. It was a Saturday then.
It was a Saturday, was it?
Yeah, Sunday this year.
How did you hear about it?
There was an advert, I think it was in Autos, and I answered it. And I said I couldn't make the meeting that day because I was at Silverstone, the meeting. They said there are 3 others there, come up together, which is what we did. So motored up from Silverstone to the meeting here. Yeah.
So you had the first Morgan convoy run on the day that we started the club going?
Yeah.
That must have been just an interesting day, having raced and then driven up here?
Well, yes, it was a hairy journey up, as you can imagine. 4 people have been competing at Silverstone.
Still in a competitive mood?
Yeah.
Yeah. And you have the proud claim to fame in the club of being the only person to have continued that membership, although we've got other founder members here today. You're the only one that's retained the membership.
So I believe, yes.
What tempted you to keep your membership? I mean, you openly admit that you don't have a Morgan at the moment.
I don't know, I suppose just the interest in Morgans, and you know, I live in the same county that they're built in. And I made so many good friends, which, you know, the other founder members are here today. I keep in touch with them, and Peter Morgan.
And of the original members, who do we think are going to be here today?
Bill Alton and his wife.
His wife was a member in her own right, because they weren't married at the time of that inaugural meeting.
No, I think she was a member, yes. And her brother Stan Dyke. Yeah. Gordon Stratton, who was an associate member because he wasn't a Morgan owner. I've heard he's coming, but I haven't seen him yet.
Yes.
And that's it, I think.
It's splendid. It's nice that that you continued a membership and that we've been able, really through your good offices, because I know you've kept in contact with these people, been able to lead us into making contact with them.
Yeah.
And you are very much our guest of honour today, because you have a unique position. And I think one of your other claims to fame is that, in fact, you've been a member of the Morgan Sports Car Club, or its founder club, longer than Peter Morgan.
Yeah.
So we'll have to...
I feel like an elder statesman.
Well, you're certainly a very important statesman in our club, and we'll have words with Peter about his short-term membership later.
Yes.
Well, thanks for your time, and do enjoy the rest of the day.
Jeff, you actually are lucky enough to own one of the rarest of all the Plus 4s, a Plus 4 Plus. What year is it?
It was built in '66.
And how long have you owned it?
20 years.
20 years, good heavens. Have you rebuilt it at all in that time?
Yes, it's taken me 5 years to rebuild it, and I'm still at it.
Right. And that's the original colour and everything,
Yes,
is it, that it
crimson,
was?
yes.
Yeah. Can you tell us anything about its history at all before you owned it?
Well, John Britton owned it in London, and before that several garages owned it, and about 2 owners.
Oh, right, I see. So it's the 13th one, in fact?
Yes.
It is the 13th one, super. And you still enjoy it as much as ever?
Oh, yes, yes.
Good, fine, thank you very much. I wish you all the best with it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
We were chatting to Bill Parks a few minutes ago, and as you know, he's retained his membership all the way through, having been here literally 40 years ago today by the date. And he was saying that one of his other claims to fame is that he actually can beats you because you weren't a member in the initial days when it was
Absolutely
formed.
true. Absolutely true. Yeah. I think the reason really was that it was a nucleus of 4 owners. Not that they wanted to exclude the plus 4, but the plus 4 was rather new at that time, you know, and I think that was it. And it was all done jokingly, I say, behind my back.
When did you actually join the club?
It must have been after about 18 months, 2 years.
Yes.
Pretty early, yes.
Because Bill was competing at about the same time as you were in the various trials and
yes,
rallies and what have you.
Yep.
And in fact, we're linking the anniversary of the club to the plus 4. When you won your class in the RAC rally, was that in the plus 4?
Oh, yes.
That was a coupe, wasn't
Plus
it?
4 coupe, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Part of the team, yes. Yes. Class, it was actually came second overall, which was quite pleasing.
Yeah, splendid.
1951.
And as a present owner of a plus 4 drophead coupe, I'm subscribing to the view that they are the real Morgan.
Well, the plus 4 always goes down in my estimation pretty highly.
Yes.
Pretty highly.
Good.
I can't say I shouldn't have a favourite Morgan, but quietly, perhaps privately, I do.
Yes. I must admit, I tend to think of a flat rad plus 4 coupe as not being the sportiest, but sort of the definitive Morgan. It's got a lot of appeal
Yes.
as far as I'm concerned.
That's right.
But I mean, we've got a fair selection here, what with the plus 4 plus and plus 4s and 8s and what have you.
Well, it's character, isn't it, really?
Yes.
I mean, you know, no car, really, without a true 1930 radiator, 1930 period radiator, is such a motor car, I think, as current styles, really.
The thing that makes
More
me...
character.
That's right. The thing that makes me smile with mine is that, in fact, it started life as a flat rad and was returned 2 years later to be converted to the modern style. And, of course, now we would class the flat rad as the more desirable.
Yeah, that's quite true, quite true.
Have you come in one of your Morgans today?
Well, I haven't exactly borrowed it. My wife said she wanted me to give it a run, so I came in hers, yes.
I see.
Plus 4, which has got the Rover engine.
Yeah.
Very nice, I enjoyed it. Good. Because normally I run a 8.
That's right, yes.
Should I go? Should I stay or should I go?
I'm Roger Healy, Centre Secretary of the Donington Centre, and that's the sort of group that really have organised this. I'd like to say good afternoon and welcome to this, our 40th anniversary of the Car Club.
Dear Morgan Sports Car Club, happy birthday to you. Thank you very much indeed. Now the children, would I say the children?
Ladies and gentlemen, it's very good to be here. I think the weather appears to be very kind on extremely important Morgan events, as I'm sure it's happened today. The forecast was rotten last night, but look what it is. I would like to refer to those original founder members and firstly thank them very much for coming here and being with us. They were most important, not only in past days, but they still are. And one of the reasons is that I was asked today, why weren't you original owner? Surely you were around then. And sure enough, I was around. But I think they got it right. They did it behind our back. They didn't want too much factory involvement. And has this not put what the club is today? It's a members' club. It isn't run by a factory or anything like that. It's run by the members. It's run by the members throughout the world. And I think we all thank those original founding members for getting it right. I'd like to give them a hand. Finally, I would like to propose a toast to the club and the future of the Morgan Sports Car Club. I did make the remark at the 84th that I knew there were going to be lots of Morgans at the 100th, but I wasn't quite sure whether I'd be there. Anyway, I'm here now, and let's raise our glasses to the future success and general enjoyment and fun of the Morgan Sports Car Club. Morgan Sports Car Club.
The following weekend, activities moved to Malvern, the home of the Morgan Motor Company, where, for the next 6 days, the town and surrounding countryside were dominated by Morgan cars. The Abbey Hotel, which derives its name from the adjacent abbey, was taken over completely by the club for the duration of the event. This hotel is also the venue for the club's annual dinner. The social centre of Malvern is the Winter Gardens complex, which was the venue for a civic reception hosted by the Malvern Hills District Council in honour of the club. The reception took place on a glorious summer's evening when guests spent most of the time either on one of the terraces or wandering around the display of cars on the lawns. Stories were exchanged, and needless to say, the talk was mainly of all things Morgan.
I was going at 80 to start with.
Oh, Jackie!
Oh, superb,
It's very good the way they make it at the seats, they see little tiny.
Saturday started as a complete contrast to the Friday evening, with the showground very wet after the overnight rain. Even the Malvern Hills were lost in the mist. Needless to say, the weather didn't deter the Morgan owners arriving for the start of the scenic runs. They were soon rewarded as the rain stopped, the cloud lifted, and the sun started to shine for what was to turn out to be a lovely day.
Cold numb fingers.
These departures are always leisurely as club members stop to chat and also decide which of the recommended routes to take. Out on the open country roads of Worcestershire and Herefordshire, the Morgans were in their element. Just listen to the sound of that 8. Before long, many of the cars had arrived at their morning coffee stop at Burton Court, where they were able to sample some of the locally grown strawberries and cream. Burton Court is the home of Mr. and Mrs. Simpson, who have a fine collection of historic costumes. On the road again, the route took them through Pembridge, one of the famous magpie, black and white villages, where on this day the scene was dominated by Morgan cars. Their destination was Whitfield, the home of Mr. George Clive. This was to be not only the lunch halt, but the venue of a specially organised country fair. The majority of craft stalls were run in aid of various charities. They were delighted to welcome the Mayor of the City of Hereford and also the Chairperson of the South Hereford County Council. It was not all activity, as Ray Salisbury was spotted enjoying the sunshine, while Anne polished the radiator of their 1949 Series 1. The highlight of the day was when the Mayor led a convoy of over 250 cars from Whitfield to the centre of Hereford. Who would have believed that the day was going to turn out so hot after the very damp start to the morning? Morgans, and still more Morgans. It's just as well Mr. Clive has a driveway out of his estate that's over 2.5 miles long, because where else could you assemble so many cars in a line before a convoy run? The road to Hereford was one long stream of Morgans, stretching as far as the eye could see. It's believed believed that this is the largest ever convoy of a single make of cars that's taken place on the roads of Great Britain. Needless to say, it needed a police escort. Included in the convoy were the third and fourth generation of the Morgan family, with Charles, grandson of the founder of the company, and his son, Zan. The sight of all these Morgans driving through the centre of Hereford is a spectacle that will be long remembered by the city and all who took part. Morgan owners are not ones to let a day in the sun sap their strength, so most had sufficient energy left to take an active part in the barn dance that was held in the Ruby Hall at the showground. Sunday morning, the day of the Ruby Anniversary Fair, dawns bright and sunny, much to the delight of those entering the international concourse competitions, who are making an early start with the final preparations to their gleaming motor cars before the crowds arrive. Other early arrivals include the historic Plus 4s for their special display, as this is also the 40th anniversary of the Morgan Plus 4. From 8 a.m, the arrivals keep the gate marshals busy. Many choose to park in special areas laid aside for specific Morgan club centres or national clubs from overseas. Even the three-wheelers had their own parking area.
Time job, to be honest.
It's a bar.
Yeah.
Around 800 Morgans and over 2,000 people came along to the Three Counties Showground on the Sunday. visitors from far and wide met other Morgan friends to swap stories, experiences and other tales of the road.
It's got a dent in the wing. Morning.
Morning.
Many took the opportunity to look around the trade stands and perhaps to buy that long-awaited item or elusive spare part. The Morgan Sports Car Club offered their own technical advisory service and special parts for those with older models. A full complement of other specialists were present, offering everything from a fully built race engine to a smaller Morgan for the very young enthusiast.
That's what you want the camera.
For the more energetic, there was a gymkhana and a pit stop challenge. All light-hearted competition, but a good test of driving skills.
Hard left, right, hard right, no, stop. No, not the start, stop. Left, 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 right, right.
Okay.
Right, well this is Chaz Nash, very well-known Morgan personality, with a Morgan Plus 4 flat rad, which I think he's owned for a very long time. So Chaz, would you like to tell us something about the car and how long you've owned it?
Right, well, basically I had two Morgans, two four-wheel Morgans before this. They were brand new ones. The first one was in 1964. It had the 1300 Kent engine, followed in 1968 by a 1600 Crossflow. And when I retired from full-time work from Shell after 41 years, I decided I'd got to get another Morgan, and the next time a flat rad. Well, I found this one up in Durham as a point of interest in 1976. It took me 12 hours to get it from Durham to Guildford. I had 5 gallons of water in a can on the passenger seat, and it consumed 7 pints of oil. So you can get some idea what it was like initially. And over the course of years, I've gradually got it up to its present standard. The engine is not the original engine. The original engine was a Vanguard. I've got a TR4 in it at the moment. I've got wider profile wheels, although I've got all the original bits at home. And the last big exercise was having it all retrimmed. Its history is a bit sketchy, except initially, the initial owners was the press. I've forgotten the name of the press. Anyhow, Bill Bodie was the authorised driver of it in 1951. And since then, I've met Bill many times because I'm a member and a director of the Brooklyn Society, and Bill is one of the founder members, and he always asks after his car, how's my Morgan getting on? He's had a couple of squirts up the test hill at Brooklands, and he keeps an eye on me and the car. But one or two little extras here, competition plugs, on ordinary standard plugs for touring, one or two little sales aids here in the way of grease gun, syringe and an oil gun. It's taxed all the year round. It's our little baby. We've got a Dagenham dustbin for everyday use, a diesel. If it's got any limitations, perhaps the drum brakes don't particularly suit the engine. But I've tried to keep it as standard as possible. It's got the standard steering mechanism, which includes the old-fashioned split pin and adjusting ball joints at the end. It's got the standard drop arms and drag links and so forth. I've been tempted once or twice to modify the steering to rack and pinion, but while the existing one works okay, I let it alone. So the only basic non-standard things is the engine, wider profile wheels, which I've got all the others. Other than that, it's pretty well as it left the factory.
And what year was it?
The 17th of June 1951. 3 days, it's 3 days older than the club. The club was formed on the 20th of June 1951, and this was on the road 3 days before. So you could almost say that they walked together arm in arm.
Right, here we have another Plus 4 flat rad. This one owned by Keith Morris. Keith, would you like to tell us something about the car?
Well, I suppose it's myself and the car together, really, because my first Morgan was an ordinary 4.4 1600, but soon discovered that the real essence of the club, and both in terms of the competition and the camaraderie amongst the people, really revolved around plus fours. So at the earliest opportunity I acquired this flat rad. The flat rad is probably the most exciting model, because it sort of captures the pre-war appearance with the sort of up-to-date performance, and certainly one can really get these machines moving in competition, whether it's on the track or up the hills or wherever you care to take them. And you know, having bought the car in about 1983 and done enough to it to really get it back on the road, it's been actively campaigned, as I say, on the track, up the hills, and constantly being improved.
Have you made many engine modifications to it, Keith?
Not a tremendous amount of modifications, more a question of really just balancing the engine and getting a proper distributor to work with this modern, not so leaded fuel that we seem to have to put up with these days.
Yeah, that's right. So it's fairly standard, really, the engine?
It's fairly standard. It's got modifications like having the later plus 4 disc brakes on the front, more for the driver's safety than any other reason. And as I say, more modern wheels and tyres, largely because for competition work you can't get serious tyres for the original 16-inch wheels. You have to go to 15-inch wheels. And
what exact year is it?
It's 1952.
It's 52, right.
As I say, originally fitted with a Vanguard engine, but that had long since disappeared before I bought it. So I bought it actually with a TR3 engine in it.
So it's TR3 engine now?
Yeah.
Right. That's super. So you'll continue to enjoy it? And
indeed. We shall get it out as often as we are allowed to.
It's nice to see you today, Pat, and Pat Kennett actually is very fortunate because he not just owns one plus 4, but he actually owns 3. And you have 2 of them here today, Pat?
Yes, I have 2 here today, and it's a nice pair to have because they represent the only significant styling change that Morgan made on the four-wheeler in 55 years, from the flat radiator style to the interim cowl style, which is next to it. The chassis is the same on all these early plus 4s, with the traditional Morgan vertical pillar suspension. Originally from the 1950 prototype through to the end of 52, very early 53, they made him with a flat radiator and a Vanguard engine, standard Vanguard engine, which these days seems very low powered, but it had about 68 brake horsepower, and in the early 50s that made it a very lively motor car indeed, and they absolutely set the competition scene alight in things like the Daily Express Rally and the Morecambe Rally and the long distance trials and those sort of things. And in fact Peter Morgan used to trial and rally a coupe identical to this one in those years. This car has done competitions all its life. I remember it doing hill climbs at Clark Hill and places like that in 1953, and I've had it since 1969, and I've done, well, I've lost count, must be a couple of hundred competitions in that time, much of it quite successful, even with the old Vanguard engine, which incidentally still has its original pistons and liners with about 450,000 miles to their credit.
Now, would you like to tell us a little bit about this one, which is in fact now in this country very, very rare indeed? How many did they make like this, Pat? Can you tell us?
It's difficult to tell. We think they made about 19. The factory records don't actually identify them as interim cowl cars. They're just plus 4s, and they started a new chassis number. But we think they made 19. Most of them went to the States because they changed the lighting regulations towards the end of 1953. And these early interim cowl cars with the straight headlamp nacelles, the headlamps were too low, like the Morris Minors at the time. They had to raise the headlamps, and they had to do the same with the Morgans, and those that didn't meet the legal requirements in the UK, they shipped them off to the States where they can sell them quite easily. But basically the chassis is just the same. I can remember these cars appearing at the motor show in 1953, and we all thought they were absolutely dreadful. We were very much in love with the flat radiator cars and the separate headlamps, and we thought these things were quite appalling. We thought they were trying to follow the MG styling trends towards more modern appearance, and we were quite right, really, because it wasn't a market success, this car, so they only made a very few of them, and then they had to restyle the front end and make various other bodywork changes to make them more acceptable and, more important perhaps, legal on the roads of Britain, which the early ones were not.
How long have you owned this one? Because you've done a lot of competition with this car.
Yes, I bought it in bits for £80, would you believe, in 1974 or thereabouts. So I put it all together, restored it, and I can't remember how many competitions I've done, but it's won the Chairman's Cup a couple of times. It won the Northern Hill and Sprint Championship. It was runner-up for the Northern Hill and Sprint Championship in another year. It's won trials galore. I've lost count, but it's quite a successful competition car, even these days. Especially if it's raining. I can beat Lotuses in the rain with that.
This is Dixon Smith, and Dixon is fortunate enough to own a +4 drop-head coupe 4-seater, which I understand you've owned from new, have you not?
No, we only 30 years.
You've owned it for just 30 years?
Just over 30 years.
And how old is it?
It's 1955 it was made, so it's 36 years old.
36?
Yes.
So you've owned it for a very long time?
We've owned it for 30 years.
And you're obviously very, very attached to it?
Yes.
Now, can you tell us a little bit about the 4-seater drop-head coupe?
Well, they made 51. It was the first car which HFS Morgan used to drive. In fact, Peter Morgan did promise me his father's old car and sold it to the States. And 13 years later he did apologise to me, saying that he promised it to me, but he'd sold it for good money. He didn't even offer the money then. He bought the car. Originally when we had the car we used to race it, sprint it, rally it, production car trial, virtually every weekend. It was completely rebuilt, what was it, 25 years ago.
25 years ago?
It was rebuilt. It was painted about 22 years ago. It hasn't really been touched since.
That's absolutely amazing, isn't it? It's lasted so long. It lasted about, what, 11 years before the first rebuild, but 25 years afterwards.
Yes, I think originally it was kept in the open a lot. I think about 3 people had it before me, you know, it's only 6 years old. But we always wanted a 4-seater coupe, had the TT replica before that, as you well know. And we said we wanted a 4-seater coupe because we were a young family. And we cut it ever since.
Quite unusual to hear of a 4-seater coupe being used in competition, because it is a much heavier, bigger car than a roadster. Was it competitive?
In production car trials, it was to the Blue Book, the RAC Blue Book, was basically written around there, so it used to run as a saloon.
Oh, right.
And with running as a saloon in the production car trials, you actually run a class every weekend.
How many miles has the car done?
It's done, what is on the clock, 46,000, that's all.
46,000. So is it used very often now?
Not
It's in retirement?
It's in retirement, very much so.
Absolutely splendid. But you still enjoy it?
We still enjoy it very much.
Well, this is Andy Biddlecombe, and Andy is fortunate enough to own what is in fact, again, a very rare +4. This is a +4 competition. Andy, would you like to tell us something about the car?
Yes, the first time I saw this car, which is called Clementine by the family, most Morgans have a nickname. Clementine was literally in bits all over this guy's floor, and I'd owned the 4.4 Ford engine car at that time, but I had lots of friends that got TR4s, and this engine is one of the classic British engines, TR4A engine, and it seemed to me that that engine and this body made the classic Morgan, God's own Morgan in my opinion. Wire wheels, British engine, a low-line competition body. The engine isn't quite as tweaked as the Super Sports, but it is, if you like, a poor man's Super Sports out of the factory. Lovely car.
You've restored the car completely, of course, several times.
Well, the guy put the car back together off his factory floor in a bit of a hurry, and the body wasn't square. You probably know it wasn't square on the chassis, and that irritated me. So I took it apart completely down to the last nut and bolts, and put her all back together in pretty fair nick. And 8 years later, she's still looking pretty good.
It's standing up very well.
Yeah.
You're having a lot of fun with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
To do so.
Yes, I had to one or two modifications to accommodate the new family. Bucket seats for the son, and possibly we'll get one more in. So it's a sort of 2 plus 2.
Right, we have a very unusual situation here because we've spoken to several owners of interesting Morgan Plus 4s this morning, but now we have really what can be almost be said 2 owners of the same car. We have virtually the original owner who used to have a very successful career with this car, sporting career at one time, and now we have the current owner, Rick Bourne, who has now become quite well known with this particular car because in fact he's now competed in 3 Pirelli Classic Marathons with it, Rick?
Second one.
This was the second one. Both of them very successfully. So Rick, would you like to tell us a few things about the car and about what you're doing with it, and also have a chat to Ray, and perhaps we can find out a little bit about the history?
Right. Well, she was born in '59, and Ray was her first owner. And I think, Ray, if you go through the earlier years...
Yeah. Well, in my day, for 12 years, I think, and I used to do circuit racing and hill climbs and things. I never thought it was particularly quick, but it was almost the quickest Morgan in its day. It went quicker every year. I did something to it, and did a little bit, and it went faster and faster, and it was quite quick at the end. And then we had twins, and we couldn't afford to keep it up, so we had to sell it. And fortunately, it finally, after a bit of a hazardous career, it finished up, and Rick bought it and carried on the good work. So
I remember well finding the car in a boatyard in Malden in Essex, and recognising the registration number, decided that I had to have the car. And it was only when I looked inside and around that the car, unfortunately, she'd fallen into a very bad state of repair. But we set on the road of getting her back to how she was before, and anybody who will ever have a relationship with this car knows that if you get it going, you've just got to get out and race it or whatever. And in the last 2 years, in really an effort to bring Jane, my wife, into our enjoyment of the car, we took up historic rallying, which Morgans, although XOV was never involved before, Morgans have been very famous in the past, and we've had a lot of success. But it is a team of 3. There's Jane who navigates, the car produces the results, and occasionally I'm allowed to twiddle the wheel.
I think you seem to do it very well, Rick, because what were the results this time in the Pirelli Classic Marathon?
They weren't quite as good as they might have been. Unfortunately, there was, on the last night, we were 7 hours into a 14-hour night section, and there was a bit of confusion as to whether we were running 3rd or 2nd, and we went in a minute early into a time control, which knocked us from what would have been we would have finished 1st, but it was 15th in the end.
Oh, Rick.
But it's proved what we set out to do 4 years ago with the Morgan. It is very competitive, even against the Minis and the MGs and the Healys. And we've proved that. Now we've just got to make sure that our administration is a little bit better for next year.
What you really were was too quick.
And none of it, the driver is quicker than the likes of Sterling Moss and John Handley, and with the Morgan, of course, with XOV.
What sort of tuning modifications have you needed to carry out, Rick, in order to be competitive like that in an event of that stature?
You could say it is to standard Supersport spec with a very mild camshaft, and as we found out, simplicity, reliability produces results, not necessarily outright speed.
Right, it's quite amazing really then how 1960s technology can put up such a good performance today.
Absolutely.
They may have had it right then.
I've said to Peter Morgan more than once that he's got it right.
It's a very unusual sight this, because never anywhere else will you see a Daimler engine in a Morgan sports car, and for many years this car has belonged to Steve Spencer, who stood here by me, but unfortunately recently he has sold the car to Andrew, who's also here. So we'll start with Steve. Steve, can you tell us something about the history of the car and about your time with it?
Yes, John, I could probably write a book about the history of the car, but I'll try and keep it simple. It was supplied to Christopher Lawrence without an engine, and he fitted originally the engine number LT1, which was a cross-flow headed Triumph TR with the carburetors on the left side. In fact, there's a hole welded up on the left side of the bonnet where the carburetors used to stick out. Quite a few of the early photographs showed scenes of the car, and you can actually see how that was arranged. He sold it in '64. In fact, in the file that I gave Andrew this morning, there's the original invoice from Lawrence, from Christopher Lawrence to Basil Fielding.
Right.
And Basil raced it the '64 and the first part of the '65 season, but prior to that, he'd been racing a Daimler SP250. And loved the engine, hated the car. At the end of '65, they thought they'd put the Daimler engine, the modified SP250, from the Dart into the Morgan.
But you have it now, Andrew. And
yes, I acquired it 10 days ago, and I have a Morgan at the moment, but with absolutely no history at all. And this car, I'm very much looking forward to enjoying it. Well, if I can enjoy it half as much as its previous owner, I should be tickled pink. Yeah, delighted with it.
Hello, Jean-Frederic. It's very nice to see you together with such a large contingent from France for the meeting.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely super. I hope you're enjoying it.
We certainly are enjoying it. It's a beautiful field around here, and I believe that you could talk to us about quite a rare super sport here.
Well, yes, I suppose in a way that all super sports are rare, because the story behind the Plus 4 Super Sports is that when Morgans in 1962 probably achieved their greatest competition success that they have ever achieved, which was to win their class at Le Mans with a Plus 4. They won the 2-litre class in that year, driven by Chris Lawrence. The factory afterwards wanted to build cars to a similar specification to that which had won its class at Le Mans. And the cars that they built to that specification were subsequently called Plus 4 Super Sports. The Plus 4 Super Sports in itself, the way it differed from a normal Plus 4 was that, first of all, the body line of the car was much lower than the normal Plus 4 that was made at that time. The wheels, which on a normal Plus 4 at that time had 60 spokes, the Super Sports had 72 spokes, because of course they were going to be used for racing, so they needed to be stronger. The engine itself was first of all a TR4 engine, which was then sent to Chris Lawrence, who then worked on the engine to produce more power, and it had a different camshaft, and it also had twin carburetors, twin Weber 42s or 45s depending on what the customer ordered, and it also had a totally different inlet and exhaust manifold system. Originally they developed something between 180 and 122 brake horsepower. This particular car at the moment has about 118 brake horsepower at the road wheels, so it is in quite a good state of tune, and it's a super thing to drive even today. Almost as fast as a modern Plus 8, perhaps over very, very long journeys not quite as usable and comfortable as a modern Plus 8, but certainly a lot more fun. Well, this is Lee Sebber, and Lee has really one of the most rare Plus 4s of the whole lot, because I only in fact know 26 of them, and this is a Plus 4 Plus. Lee, would you like to tell us something about the car and how you came by it and anything in its history?
Yeah, certainly. Well, I've been a member of the Morgan Club, I think, for over 20 years, and I've had 4 4s and a Plus 8, which I've raced for many years. And over recent years, I was looking for something a bit different, and perhaps a bit more historical. And as you were saying, there's only 26 of these cars ever made, and there's about 15 of them people know where they are, and there's about half a dozen in England. And this one was imported about a year ago, and I had the chance to acquire it, and I thought, well, it's not a chance like this isn't likely to come up again for many, many years. And having bought it, I must say I'm very, very pleased I took the chance. It is particularly interesting, as it was owned at one time by John Sheely in America, who's written many books on Morgan cars, and he did part of the rebuilding, including putting chrome on several parts, and it then was sold on to a gentleman in Texas, Ted Glover, who I believe finished the rebuilding, but perhaps found it was a bit hot driving in Texas. And I must say, having driven up here this weekend on an 80-degree English summer's day, I must say really it is rather a hot car to be in. But on the other hand, for a normal English weather, it's perhaps the most practical all year round Morgan to have. Basically, it's a standard +4, 1964 +4 underneath the fiberglass body. And what you think of the body, people vary. I mean, some people think it looks beautiful. Other people think Morgan should never have done it. I believe Mr. Peter Morgan was very pleased with his design and production of it, and he was always unhappy that it was never a great success.
This is Alan Cameron, and Alan, in fact, is lucky enough to have an absolutely unique Morgan. This is a +4 4-seater Super Sport. Alan, would you like to tell us something about the car?
Well, the car was built on special request for Eric White from the dealership at Alan White's Cranfield. He ran it then for 5 or 6 years and was replaced by a +8 4-seater, again a unique car from the factory. And then it was sold to his, I think it was his accountant or his solicitor, hence the number RW, the chap was called Roger Williams. And then some people called the Hallisseys bought the car, and I bought the car from them. I bought it in '85, and they'd actually had the car rebuilt in '82, '83, and I've had it since. And I've had some great fun with it. The car was built and laid down in the late '66, and Eric actually held it over and registered it in 1st of Jan '67. And obviously the Super Sports engine and everything was what made it special. It's a 2.2 litres, 120 horsepower engine, which is what they were using in the race cars. Yes, it's just a characterful motor car. I mean, it's been fabulous.
This is Roy Halford. Roy has a +4 4-seater. I think in actual fact, Roy, it's one of the last +4 4-seaters made, isn't it?
Yes, I believe it's about 30 chassis numbers from the end.
So it's 1960?
Late 68.
Late 68. Can you tell us anything about the history of the car, Roy, and what you've done with it?
What I found out from previous owners, it seems that the car went to France for a few years and then came back about 10 years ago, and I bought it then. It had suffered from overheating out there, and it was reasonably sound, but just mechanical problems, and I've had it since then. And about 4 years ago took it apart to change the chassis without restoring the bodywork, so I put that all back in one piece.
How do you take a car and put a new chassis under it, Roy, without restoring the bodywork?
Well, the Morgan manual says you withdraw the steering column and lift the whole bodywork off in one piece with the wings attached, and that's exactly what you do.
Is that what you did?
That's what I did. You remove it on one long beam and it all comes up, yes. It has to be a good fit on the new chassis though.
And was it?
Yes, it was. Once we'd worked out this thing of the bodywork untwisting a little, once we'd catered for that, it fitted nicely.
So you managed to do it really with very, very little alteration or modification?
No disturbance of the paintwork at all.
Absolutely incredible.
Yes.
This is John Hazelwood, and John Hazelwood has one of the first of the new +4s, because of course the +4s actually ceased production in 1969, and they started up again in the late 80s. They started up again, in fact, with a Fiat twin cam engine, and I think this must be one of the first of them, Eddie.
Yes, it is. They put them in for only a very few months because the engine actually turned round and became a front-wheel drive engine. So only 150 Fiat engine Morgans were built, and this one was one of the first. And actually was at a motor show.
Have you had it from new?
No, I bought it about 9 months old and then decided to have it tuned, and so it now goes a little bit faster.
So what have you done to it?
Well, we've changed the head and put in high compression pistons, rally cams, and a Weber programmable engine management system.
And what do you think that's actually done to the performance?
Well, it's been tested on rolling road at 135 brake horse at the rear wheels, so it's probably 165 actually at the engine.
Yeah, getting on towards the performance of a carburetted +8, isn't it?
Yes, on power-to-weight ratio, in fact, it's exactly the same.
Are you doing any competition with the car?
No, I just use it for chasing taxis.
Chasing taxis?
That's right.
That's absolutely superb. That really is good.
At the end of the afternoon, Everyone gathered around the bandstand to watch the presentation of these magnificent trophies to those who'd been successful during the day. The delighted chap with the shield is Sebastian Rapp. He came all the way from Holland to win the Gymkhana. The grand finale to Sunday's events was a banquet held in the Ruby Hall, where, to a backdrop of Morgan motor cars, the club's founder members, Jeff Sparrow and Bill Parks, joined the president, Peter Morgan, and the other members to reminisce and share experiences with more recent members of 40 years of the Morgan Sports Car Club. Monday morning, and the weather has broken with a wet start for the test day at Castle Combe Racing Circuit. Cars are being prepared for the track, and all cars have to be scrutineered, checked for their suitability and safety on the circuit. Yes, even Charles Morgan's own 3.9 plus 8.
Yes, sir. Pictures while you're driving around. Okay. So, please, in my own experience,
As the track dries out a little, the drivers really start to have a go. Several well-known cars from the Morgan Sports Car Club Racing Series can be seen, including Jeff Stowe in the Maroon Plus 8 with hood erect, and Tim Duncan in the Dark Green Plus 4. After an exciting day on the circuit, everyone lines up for a photo call before making their way back to the Abbey Hotel in Malvern for the 50s supper party. The track must have been just a little too slippy for some. No, it's Peter Olof from the Rheinmock Group in Germany, dressed as the Invisible Man. Several came in 50s dress. Even the event organizer had searched out his old 50s suit for the occasion.
Tonight is the night that calls for, it's an international meeting, it calls for an international speech. And the country I've identified with tonight is Southern Ireland. So tonight is the night for a Southern Irish speech. And a Southern Irish speech basically says there are no speeches tonight. Enjoy.